What's up, guys? Welcome back to another TCG Scrubs video. I don't know what you would call this one, but we have a special guest, and this time I'm actually...
ever. That's what I call it.
Finally, right? But we have now two Team ARG members with us. And,
this is now an ARG
just
podcast.
One. Yeah. And I think it's great, because the stuff we're going to talk about, I feel like we have the two spectrums of players, the good ones and then the not good ones. Shot at Colin.
I thought that you were shooting yourself there.
Yeah, I'm on
especially after today's locals, man.
You
didn't win a single round, not a single round.
I will
say in the ARG chat for like the past 6 months, anytime like we're talking about stuff, it's like, yo, what if pandas are good? Let's ask Colin, and then Colin will talk for like a little bit. We're like, all right, no, pandas aren't good. But now like pandas are seriously like maybe a consideration. Or like, what if Colin's been the secret like star the whole time?
I'm just gonna say, especially after locals today and last time 2 weeks ago. There's literally very few things more satisfying than flipping over with like 12 dark tokens and just wiping their field. They play Mistletoe, in response to her enter, you kill her, so they never get her effect, and just continue. Yeah. They never get a field again as long as you keep Panda. Very satisfying. Yeah. I don't know if it's good, but it's fun.
Satisfying is what counts at locals, you know.
Oh yeah. All right, so we got some interesting things to go over in today's. Yeah. Obviously, we're gonna ask Ryan. If we have time here, about his thoughts on current events. As of right now, recording, we still have not got an announcement from the company. If they don't do one today, you will have heard from me, because I'm going to do a separate video on that. But something that interesting that came up that at least I didn't know about. Apparently, other people knew about, just didn't want to tell me. Ryan was part of something with Force of Will. So do you want to kind of explain what that was, what you're doing?
Yeah, so obviously the game has been getting a lot better recently, and Jeff had reached out to me at Worlds and had reached out to some other people even before then. I'm kind of like one of the later additions, just to like help with a direct line from like the community to the company. So like obviously I do the Roller School podcast. I've done a lot of videos. I play in a lot of events. I put a lot of time into Force of Will, so I know competitively how the game is played. I know from a community perspective what people want. And then like Jeff also has a lot of like a broad range of like seeing, you know, all the content that we produce, like seeing the US group, same as I do, but like being able to talk directly to some of the community mouthpieces and then also like some of the competitive players like helps it make Force of Will understand more what we're looking for and what the community is interested in. So that was kind of like my role, as I was in direct communication with Jeff and like, you know, a group chat, or just like in his PMs, just like talking about like what the direction of the game is and stuff like that.
And that came to specifics as well, as far as you had mentioned right before recording this, like looking at cards as well as ban lists and different things like that.
Yeah, so he did reach out to me about the ban list for the last set, what ended up being Distortion of Time and Spirit Stone, and also like the Wanderer ban list. And I think it's like a really good thing that I was able to like help influence that decision, because, you know, like from a company perspective, we've had ban lists in the past where it's like, let's, you know, not ban Shahrazad and let's ban, you know, Ginny and Ruin Stories and Ava, and that's going to be fine, right? And like if I was in the room, I'd be like, no, ban Shahrazad. But you know, they've been a bit slow before, and I think this was like, hey, Distortion of Time is a problem. Can you ban it, please? And I was like, he kind of approached me with that as like, hey, what are my options here? And I'm like, well, Jeff, you should really ban Distortion of Time. But if you don't want to, like, I like talked about like the pros and cons of like each card that I thought could go on the ban list. So I'm like, if they don't want to ban Distortion of Time for whatever reason, right? I know they don't want to just like directly ban it to the community, or like it's a super rare, so they don't want to ban it for that reason. Like whatever magical reason, like if you just want to hear my opinion on what you can ban, it was like, well, here's some reasons for Mosasaurus instead. Here's some reasons for Dragonlord's Breath, because if you ban Dragonlord's Breath, then like Kirik can actually just like take Time Squash down completely. But like I really thought that Distortion of Time was like what needed to go. And then I don't know if I was the only one. He also talked to some players in other regions, including Japan and Europe, but I'm not in contact with those guys, so I don't know what their suggestions were. I just know what the final results were. But I had suggested Spirit Stone, because I'm like, hey, once you like do hit Time Spinning Witch, like I think Hanzo is going to be the best deck, and it's also a little ridiculous that you can draw 3 cards for 2 mana. So that was something that I had suggested, and I was really happy to see it go on the list. I was actually kind of surprised I did ban Distortion of Time, because I thought I had some good arguments for other cards, but like that was just like, I didn't like have final say on the ban list. I'm just like, here is my perspective as a competitive player.
That's cool. So it's interesting to hear that you had at least given that suggestion, because that was one thing when the ban list came out. I was like, okay, distortion time. I'm really glad that got hit. And I saw Spirit Stone, and I was like, okay, that wasn't like, I think about it once I see the combo, but whenever I don't see the combo, which isn't often, Spirit Stone doesn't even come to mind. So when I saw on the ban list, just the fact that it was I knew we talked about it right away that I think that's one of the first proactive bans that the company had done. Yeah. Like, hey, with Distortion gone, this thing is going to be big, so we're going to ban Spirit Stone ahead of time. And I was really happy to see that.
Spirit Stone have been like popping up a lot for like since the Scheherazade days, and it's always kind of like just been there in green decks. But I think it was like at a point where it was about to become a real problem. So I'm really glad they did go through with that.
Yeah, especially in the mono format. And also, I'm sure there might be other examples, but one example you had mentioned, I don't know if you wanted to talk about it, was the card that was spoiled for Awakening, whatever the next set is called.
Oh, yeah, the Sprout reprint.
Yeah.
Basically, this wasn't even me. He had actually messaged somebody else that is on like the community like team and was like, hey, how do I tell R&D that we shouldn't reprint, what's it called, Sprout or something like that?
Was it Idriso Sprout or something like that? Sprout of the Idriso?
Yeah, Sprout of Idriso, something like that. And it was just like, we didn't, like, I didn't really have any influence over this at all. I wasn't a part of the team at the point, but it was like, when they were like first designing it, they were like, they want to reprint this card and they want to reprint it in white. And it was like, how do I fix this? Or how do I like make an argument for, please don't do this, dear God, please no. In Brunhild reanimate colors, like, don't print this. And that was like, whoever was on the team at the time had like basically given him like a list of suggestions, like, here are some like not degenerate versions of what the card could be. But I didn't do that. But like, I think the version we ended up getting was very balanced, I guess, compared to what it like could have been.
Compared to what it could have been, yeah. I am curious to see how that plays out, because it still, to me at least, felt pretty strong for the Brunhild because it gives that discard power into Brunhild, but we'll see. So a couple of questions we had here, so we'll dive into that. So I guess you went over this, but in case you missed anything, one of the questions was, how have you helped in the role you were in? Are there other examples of stuff you've helped with?
Not really. Like I said, he talked to me at Worlds about it, so I've only been like talking to him in that capacity for 5-ish months, and like the main like I think good that I did was to like help give suggestions for what the ban list was. We never, like, I am a competitive player first and foremost, so like it was very strict that I was not getting like any competitive edge. Right? I wasn't getting cards early. For example, like the Sprout or whatever, he had mentioned that before I was on the team, which was before Worlds, and now the card is not coming out until R3. Like, that's how, the only thing that I can think of that would even come close to that, and like I wasn't even a part of that. But yeah, I never like saw like, one of the things with like helping with the ban list was that I didn't get to know what the next set was going to be. I'm just like, here's what the meta is right now. I don't know if you're going to print something that is going to help combat Distortion of Time, but in case you do and don't want to ban Distortion of Time, like that was kind of how I framed my like arguments and stuff. Yeah, just kind of like expressing community opinion as well. Like if there was like a question of like, hey, how do people feel about, you know, like other decks that aren't just like like people want to play, like, should we take Scheherazade off the ban list? I'm like, no, absolutely not. Like stuff like that, I guess. Yeah, I can't really think of any other examples, just because it has really been a really short time. But it was just like a constant conversation between like what felt like me and the company, and just like making sure that like we were improving the game, I guess.
So let me scroll down here.
Yeah, you're good.
What were the so you said you were communicating with, which I will say real quick that like we weren't aware of this, but this was I thought once I heard of this, a really cool idea. It sounds like Jeff had come up with the idea of getting different people from different areas to feed their opinions directly, whether it be competitively for the ban list, people who are good with card metas to figure out what cards should or shouldn't be banned or altered, like in the case of Sprout and stuff like that. But the question was, what were the methods of communication between like you and Jeff? Did you just have a channel to Jeff, or was it the development team as a whole, or is it just basically using Jeff as a conduit?
No, I don't think any of the development team actually speaks English, so it was kind of like me to Jeff to the company. as far as I'm aware. Like I did get to talk with him a lot about like what the philosophy behind the design team is, and I know that like when he's been on your podcast before, he's talked about it himself, where like they kind of have their own idea of what a card game is compared to the Western cultures. Like when they're building a set, it's more like they're building their own art. Like their game is an art. Like they want to make this whole thing that has these elements and these elements, and it's like they're just trying to piece it all together. So like when you try and like mess with that, like it's a little offensive in some ways, but also like you want to like do that as little as possible and just like kind of express in the plainest terms like what outliers are, why they're outliers, and then try to help them change their end goal into something that still fits in with their original vision. So like I didn't like edit any cards or just like say, oh, this, you know, this is why this card's such a problem. It was just kind of like I got to understand their perspective, so then I tried to help iterate the Western perspective in a way that was like cohesive with that, so that they would be more receptive to like changes that I would suggest. But yeah.
Based on your suggestions and what you might have heard from other people maybe on this sort of thing Jeff put together, how seriously do you think they took your guys' suggestions? Do you think it was sort of half and half, or did they overall take them pretty seriously? Or
I know that like I said, I just haven't been on it that long. But like it was mainly just like I guess sentiment overall. Like yeah, I really like I can't think of too many examples outside of just like the ban list where I was just trying to I don't know. Like there's only been like some like we've only had like one set drop since that happened, and it's just been like I know I talked with him a lot, just in general, and just like it was really cool for me personally, just because like I said, I'm getting an understanding of like what the company is like trying like is like thinking about every decision they make. But then like once I understand their perspective, I'm like, okay, this makes sense now, like do what you got to do. There wasn't like any real like changes that got made like because of like things that I said or anything like that, because like it was just like a more like mutual understanding kind of thing, and then like having that direct line to say if anything does become an egregious problem, or like hey, you shouldn't do this kind of thing. I knew that I could just be like, hey, Jeff, can you talk to them? And then it was like, here's why I can't. And I'm like, oh, that's frustrating but understandable kind of thing. So
you're gonna say something, Oscar?
I was actually curious, is there anything that went on that didn't make it to the ban list that you'd have liked to have seen?
I mean,
you think it hit it right where it needed to?
I thought I had a really cool idea. I was really kind of pulling for Dragonlord's Breath to get banned, just because like it kept Time Sandwich alive, but like also just like made it very, very vulnerable to aggro decks. But like I think Distortion being on is like completely fine. But like now I don't think Time Sandwich is like viable at all, except for like in like because it is just like dead to aggro anyway. But just in like a less cool way, I guess. Yeah, like I said, I just like pretty much anything I talked with Jeff about, I would just like talk with the community about it. I didn't have like any secret information or anything. It was just like, you know, I get to understand like the mindset and just like stuff that isn't actually important, but like is really cool to, you know, like think about, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm very, like, I think you guys are kind of overstating like what I exactly did. I was just like, I get to talk to Jeff. You know, like you can, anyone can do that. Anyone can message Jeff, you know?
Yeah, but obviously you have more of an impact than most people, I think. when you talk to Jeff. But have you heard of like, because you had mentioned that this, and I agree that this cluster so far has been one of my favorite and best as far as balance wise and stuff like that, with a couple of exceptions. But overall, do you think that's because of stuff like this that Jeff was doing, or do you think it's just unrelated type of thing?
I definitely think so. I think that Jeff's role with the company was like the influence that he did have. He wielded very well, and he was able to, you know, like help with certain decisions. I know that like Worlds being cluster instead of New Frontiers, I believe, was a big push from him. And that's really important, I think, because it does help. Like, it's just a good showcase event. Like, you get to see the new set. It was unfortunate that machines seemed like to be very dominant, but like that ended up not being the case. I think there was only like 3 or 4 machines in top 8, and we got to see like the Brunhild and Lucifer and stuff. So I think like the competitive community kind of overrated that. But like compared to 2017, where Worlds wasn't streamed, where Worlds was like an awful garbage, like no ban list, new frontiers format. And then like I think picking Jeremy up was something that he really pushed for. Be like, hey, we need to stream all of our GPs because we want people to see our game played at a competitive level. Like I know he had influence in that as well. So like, yeah, I think he was a really good like influence for the company towards the Western audience, I guess.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
It is sad to see him go. But like, I know that he helped leave an impression on like what it is that Western players want, and had already like started influencing like design philosophy and like ban list stuff like for future sets. So I hope that isn't like lost now that he's gone. And I don't get the impression that it will be, but it's still just like a big question mark like what's going on with the company, you know? I mean,
so moving on from that, just sort of in general, wanted to know your why is this? I wrote that backwards, but your thoughts on the, like I said, we're waiting for the announcement, but sans that, we have the Jeff announcement of him dropping and Rob, and then by extension of Jeff leaving, Steph and the judge program was frozen and stuff like that. So what are your thoughts on the current situation as it stands right now?
Yeah, so I'm still not really sure what's going on, and I'm like, okay, I talk to Jeff pretty regularly with like some like pretty intense stuff, and then I haven't gotten anything from him. I'm a moderator for the Forcible US group, so there's a group head for the moderators, which Rob Abear is in, and he's just been like, I can only tell you guys what I'm gonna like put in this post. He makes the post. I'm like, all right, so like, are we getting an announcement from the company? He's like, I'm talking to them all night. Like, here's a screenshot of like people calling me, and it's just like, okay, like what do we know what's gonna happen? He's like, they'll make an announcement. I can't say anything, and it's like we're all just kind of waiting. I don't have any like I have special ins, like I know people, but they're not telling me anything. It's just, I really like this is some stuff. Like my impression is that it's like mostly just not good news. Like obviously scaling back GPs, scaling back pricing is like there's something going on. I just don't know like what they're gonna come out of this and say. All right, here's why we had to scale it back, or we're scaling it back, and here's what happened, here's how we're going to improve going forward. Because I think the game has been in like one of the best places like to play, and has been like reviving locals wise, and we've been collecting players and stuff. So
we just had 8 people show up at our locals, which and that's after a 10-person pre-release or something like that. And our locals, I think we finally revived it this past month.
Yeah. So it's just like, honestly, they just have to say literally anything, and just like don't like say anything besides the game is dead, and then like people will be like, okay, then we're fine. Like I think it'll definitely hurt competitive like attendance, but like that's kind of already been on the down low, and I don't know. Like my brother's just gonna win everything anyway, so you guys don't even bother. Like you're gonna go, you already know it's gonna happen. No, I'm kidding.
Will you be at you're gonna go to Vegas?
I'm going to Berlin.
Berlin, okay.
Yeah, I had promised some of the German guys I hung out with in Japan that I was going to come to Berlin in February, because they already knew when the GP was. I'm like, it's 5 months out, I'm going. Then, of course, we wait for our GP announcement like a month ago, and it's like, hey, it's same week in Vegas. I'm like, actually not Vegas. Like, well, whatever, I get to go to Germany. I've always wanted to go to Germany, so.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that was sort of us not hearing anything, I think, just by definition means it's not going to be something positive. They say otherwise, they would have been like, "Hey, put out this fire. Here's the positive thing. We got a $30 million deal with someone." But
as far as I know, like there's nothing like that. But like I know that like Rob is still actively talking with people, and that is like part of why they haven't said anything. Like there's just still a lot of things that are getting hashed out. That is all I know. I don't know what those things are. I just know like there's still like if things are being hashed out, that implies to me that there is still like the potential for these things to be hashed out into, okay, now we can make this announcement because we did this thing or whatever, you know, like it's not necessarily going to be bad news. It's just like,
right.
Yeah. Even if it's good news though, they've hurt themselves pretty bad, I think, which is unfortunate, especially when Rob mentioned, and which took me aback until Rob stepped in, they were just straight up canceling everything this year, including Worlds. That one.
Were they?
Yeah, that was in Rob's post. Yeah. But it is unfortunate for the canceling of the 2 main GPs as well, because if it wasn't for a technical difficulty I hit at the last second, I 100% had a was going to have a plane ticket to Collinsville. So, but a technical, me being dumb and missed it by like 10 hours, I think, for my plane ticket is the only reason I don't have a plane ticket there. Wow. So, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only person that... Unfortunately, whether it's the best news ever or not, they've, at minimum, temporarily for the next year, hurt the game with everything, I think.
I think that's kind of pessimistic.
I mean... Just on our video we did, just going over Rob's posts and stuff, I think we've seen enough comments of people upset or already selling their collections and stuff like that, that this has done significant harm to the game being possibly at one of the best points it's ever been in the past 2 years, which is unfortunate. We were on a perfect upward climb, and all they had to do was communicate. Even if it's something negative, as long as you communicate, people could. The Force Will community has been through quite a lot. We could roll with it, but I think this is not helping too much, the waiting part.
Yeah, but, I mean, it has been like, I think, a week since Jeff's announcement or something like that, and it does feel kind of long. But
9
with,
days.
Rob's announcement on top of it, yeah, it's starting to feel a bit elongated. But I think, like, if they come up with an announcement, it's like all doom and gloom, then like, well, it doesn't matter that you made us wait because it was going to be a bad news anyway. So there's no coming back from that, whatever, you know. But if it is good news, like it's just, and it's like, okay, here's the good news. Now that we actually know what the hell's going on, we understand like why there was this wait. Like whatever the news is, it's either bad news doesn't matter or good news. And I think we bounce right back. Like I don't think there's going to be like an actual like high number of like people are going to complain because this is a bad thing. This is not. We are not in a good spot right now because we are in the unknown. And when people on the internet are in the unknown, they want to like just go on their keyboard and be like, I'm upset that I don't know what is going on. Feel my rage. Like, you are entitled to do that. But as soon as the good news comes out, if that happens, and it's just like, well, now you look silly, first of all. And second of all, like, are you still out of the game just because like they had to like take a reasonable amount of time operating on a business schedule to like hash these things out that they needed to hash out? I don't think so. I think that if we're going to get good news, it will be fine, and this will just be a speed bump. If it is bad news, then, well, I mean, Argent Saga comes out in like the middle of the year, so, you know. That's how I see it. I think this is either going to be fine or it was doomed from the start anyway. I don't think them taking so long to get their shit together is a bad thing. I want them to get their shit together. So,
yeah, and if it turns out to be good, obviously that's the preferable thing. I just wish they would at least do a post of like, hey, don't worry, guys. Stop speculating. Give us 3 days. Here's the time announcement. And everyone could be like, okay. Well, but like... and I've said this from the beginning. Whoever runs PR at Force Will, if they even have a PR department, is terrible at their job. And so I think this reinforces
spoiled in that department.
But you know, hopefully it turns out on the positive going forward. Did you have any last thoughts though as we wind this down here? Or
no,
Oscar last question? Yeah.
Any advice for anybody going to Vegas next week?
Ooh, yeah.
We had Joey do his
Did you see Joey's prediction?
Don't play IU. No, I didn't see his prediction. What did he predict?
What did he predict, Oscar?
He was down to Brunhild or Hanzo. Once your Hanzo list came out, he was like praising you, like, oh
yeah,
man.
No, I didn't see that.
Poetry.
Where's Joey? I want to meet Joey.
Yeah.
I want to meet Oscar, and I'm like, Joey. I was telling Colin in the group chat. Anytime, like, I usually don't get a chance to like watch all of you guys' podcasts because like I listen to other podcasts at work, and sometimes I just don't even see they come out. But like, anytime after an event, I have to come in here and listen to Joey talk about my deck. And it's like, yeah, this man gets it. This is like my ego boost. You know, Brunhild and Hanzo are definitely viable options. I really, really like Brunhild. I have a gold Brunhild that I won in Minnesota that I really, really want to play. So I'm really biased towards Brunhild. And it beats all the aggro decks like blindfolded. It just kind of struggles against Hanzo and like some like hard control stuff. So I don't know. I really like that deck. I really want to play it. I also really like Hanzo. I think Kirik is a bad dumb deck, and I think IU, no one should play that. That's my opinion.
Oscar.
Are you playing IU?
No, I did. It's been a while. And you know what? Actually, we had it on our channel. That's the last time I played it. Okay. And then Lars messaged me.
He's still been on the IU train of like, oh man, it still could be blah blah blah.
I haven't talked about that in forever. I'm ignoring Colin. But I think we're done now, right? That's the wrap up, right?
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you Ryan for being here.
Yeah.
And being the better Team ARG player here. And we'll see everybody next time.
Awesome. Thank you.